Afternoon, everyone. My name is John Donnelly. I'm Chief of DC Fire and EMS Department, and I'm joined here today by members of the Unified Command Team to give you an update on the recovery operations here in the Potomac River. I'm joined today by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Colonel Francis Pera, and U.S. Coast Guard Captain Patrick Burkett, as well as the Metropolitan Police Department Assistant Chief Jeffrey Carroll, HTMA Deputy Director Justin Brown, the Fire Chief for the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, Rick Bonnet, the Police Chief for the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, Police Major Tim Moore, the Maryland State Police First Sergeant John Pitenza, and the U.S. Army Deputy Director of Aviation, Colonel Mark Ott. We have the next slide. So overnight, we've been conducting search and rescue operations, or really since our last update. And these operations have continued with our regular partners from the region, as well as some of the assets that have arrived on scene. During our salvage surveys in preparation to lift the aircraft, additional remains were located and removed from the river and taken to the medical examiner's office. So far, 55 victims have been positively identified from this aircraft, or from this accident. The NTSB, American, and PSA Airlines, as well as district officials, Red Cross, and some other support organizations are continuing to support the families at the Family Assistance Center and during a site visit. So far, the only injury on this event that we have to report is that one of the Metropolitan Police Department divers was transported to an area hospital to be checked out after a hypothermia situation. We're happy to report that he's doing fine, and that's the only injury we have. Today, for the rest of the day, the salvage crews are continuing to survey the site and get ready for tomorrow. Can we have the next slide? So going forward tomorrow, and you're going to get more from the Army Corps of Engineers about this, is salvage equipment will be moved into place, and tomorrow there'll be some lifting operations on what's the wreckage that's in the water. While that's going on, the local teams will continue to search down the shorelines and around the river to make sure that we're getting all the debris that's out there. And if by chance, as a member of the public, you come across some of that, you should call 911 and report it to them, and we will get it taken care of and get it examined. Next slide. So our first responders, all the people that are coming in here to support, this is a tough operation, and we want you to know, and if you're a responder listening to this, we want you to know that you can have a lot of different feelings about this, and there's people out here to help you. So each of our organizations have peer support. The Unified Command is coordinating peer support for the responders as they work. And you can easily talk to a trained mental health professional by dialing 988 at the Crisis Lifeline. And we would like everybody to look out for each other during this time, check in on your neighbors, that there are a lot of people that are being affected by this tragedy in our community. Additionally, if you want to contribute to the relief fund, the Greater Washington Community Foundation has a relief fund. It's tinyurl.com/DCA together. And that is a legitimate site that you can use to donate if that's a way you do want to help. With that, I'd like to call up Colonel Pena, and he's got a brief.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colonel Francis Pera. I'm the commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Baltimore District. I'd first like to say that really our hearts and minds remain with the victims of this tragic incident. I also really want to thank the cooperation that we're getting at the local, state, and federal level. This is an incredible joint response effort. Right now, the Corps of Engineers, together with the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy's Supervisor of Salvage and Diving, or SUPSALV, we're leading the effort to clear the wreckage for the Potomac River as part of a larger interagency effort. Before I can explain how this wreckage removal will work, I just want to make sure that everyone is crystal clear understanding that all salvage operations will be completed in close coordination with the Unified Command. All of our partners, just really to ensure strict adherence to our central priority that the dignified recovery of missing flight passengers and personnel take precedence, right? And should any remains be found during our process, an automatic work stoppage happens, and we will definitely begin the proper coordination with the appropriate authorities. So reuniting those lost in the tragic incident is really what keeps us all going. We've got teams that have been working this effort since the beginning, and we're committed to making this happen. So our teams over the past couple of days have been really doing the preparatory work to make sure that we're doing this the best way possible. There's an iterative process that we go through that starts with really the dive survey process to really understand. I've got a small graphic that we're sharing with some of you here. That first piece is a sonar piece. We've got a wide debris field. Within that wide debris field, we're employing different techniques to make sure that we can understand what's in the water. Once we've localized really the larger items that we want to focus on, that really starts to shape our dive effort. Our dive effort is there with some very trained personnel. These are personnel who have a lot of experience. Many of you in the local area are familiar with the response that we had at the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's very similar in the capability and experience that we brought there. This dive team goes down, they look and they do their prep and work to make sure that they can establish a great salvage plan. Once they build that salvage plan, we'll spend the next period of planning and preparation to prepare for our lift plan. That's where we're at today. Today is our second day of survey in the water. I think we've done everything to set the conditions for a successful lift starting tomorrow morning. We anticipate that we'll start at first light. Right now, if you look out in the Potomac, you'll see that all of our equipment and personnel are in place. We've completed our rehearsals, and all the processes that I talked about previously have been rehearsed to a T with all of our joint partners. As we go through that, when we begin the lift process tomorrow, our goal is to really lift as much as we can, given the fact that we are also accounting for the human remains component. And then our goal is to then transfer those pieces of equipment over to a flatbed trailer that will now take it over to a designated hangar so that the investigation can begin. At that point, we're going to reassess. We'll repeat this operation. It's really just a reminder that we're extremely deliberate about how we're approaching this, and we're doing this in partnership with each member of the Unified Command with the victims in mind. I'll stand by for any questions you all may have, and I'll be followed by Captain Pat Burkett from the U.S. Coast Guard.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Captain Pat Burkett. I am the Sector Commander for Coast Guard Sector Maryland National Capital Region. And first of all, I just want to say, like everyone else, I just want to offer my condolences to the family and the loved ones involved with this tragic accident. I also want to just say thank you to the community. We, the Coast Guard, along with the first responders here, have just received a tremendous outpouring of support from the community, from messages and social media. Just thank you so much. That really helps us keep going and keep the mission focused on what we need to do over the next couple of days. But what I want to do is kind of talk about the Coast Guard's role here. What we're doing is essentially monitoring the safety zone that we have established. And that safety zone is for all waters north of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge on the Potomac River. So the area that you see here in the graphic in red, that's the Coast Guard established safety zone that only vessels that's been pre-vetted for this operation are going to be allowed to get into. The Coast Guard have right now on the water 4 what we call our small boat assets that's monitoring that area, and then we have 2 Coast Guard cutters that's also in the area to ensure only those authorized vessels are in the area. And if there's any other vessels that have to get through this area or need to transit, you need to call on Coast Guard Channel 16 or either call the Coast Guard Command Center so that you can request permission to see if there's any possibility of you coming in those areas. But right now that waterway is closed only for those involved with this operation. And Coast Guard's primary missions right now for this incident remain to ensure the safety of the public and first responders. And we will do that by ensuring no one is in this security zone, the safety zone. Like I said, we have about 200 personnel in addition to those vessels that's on the waterway, to include active duty civilian and auxiliary Coast Guard personnel that's all involved to make sure we can support our partners in this effort. As we aid in the recovery and salvage efforts, and like I said, we just want to support the National Transportation Safety Board, the Army Corps engineers, and Navy Supervisor of Salvage to ensure we clear the wreckage and recover everyone involved in this incident. Any questions, I'll stand by and pass it back over to Captain John Dowling.
So now we're going to take some questions. I'll start over here and work my way across. 1, 2, 3.
Chief, just wondering if you attended the memorial along the river this morning.
So,
What was that like?
so I did not attend that. We did not have, this is a family event, and it is something smaller for them.
You have been meeting with the families, though, over the last
I have been meeting with the families over the last several days.
How has that
I think it's exactly like what you'd expect. These people have suffered a terrible loss, and they're grieving. And I think that that's exactly what you'd expect. There's a whole range of emotions in that. I will say that they are a strong group of families that are focused on getting their loved ones back, and I think that's the appropriate place to be at this point. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Colonel Para, I have a question. My understanding is that in some cases, in order to reach some of the unaccounted for, I think requires moving the wreckage. You talked about how there's a pause if a person is recovered. How do you juggle that when, those folks may be in the wreckage you're moving, or that wreckage may need to move in order to access those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how do we address the fact that there may be remains inside some portions of the wreckage that we're trying to recover? We walked through that in several rehearsals. We've talked through that with everyone who's been really kind of dealing with this tragic accident, the teams that have been in the water up to this point. What we're finding is, during our dive surveys, we really get a good appreciation of kind of where the wreckage is, where the lift points are, and at that same time, based on the type of equipment that we're bringing, and we're finding that we have a much better view of kind of what's in the wreckage than what we've seen with some of the other dive operations, really because we're really kind of taking a dive salvage approach. So when our divers go down there, they've got a much wider view on their helmet, and they also carry a HD camera that's supported by a support boat. So you've honestly got 4 or 5 sets of eyes looking inside of a wreckage at the same time. We already do have clear water, so that just kind of aids in that process. During our surveys, for instance, yesterday, they were able to identify 11 separate human remains as part of this effort, as part of their preparatory operation for dive. We do have a process where we will watching the lift as it happens, and then if there are remains in there that will not move while we're recovering the wreckage, we will bring that wreckage to the surface of the barge. Our process to immediately tent the barge to make sure that we have full discretion, and then we'll bring in the proper personnel to deal with that at that time.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Next question.
Chief, you mentioned that 55 victims at this point have been recovered and identified. How confident are you that your team knows where those additional 12 victims are in the water and that you will be able to recover everyone who died in the crash?
So it is my belief that we're going to recover everyone. If we knew where they were, though, we would already have them out. So we have some work to do as the salvage operation goes on, and we will absolutely stay here and search until such point as we have everybody.
Are there any areas where you know there are victims, but your divers just haven't been able to reach those spots because of the wreckage?
I don't know that for a fact. Okay, next 3 questions. And actually, I should have repeated your question at the beginning, if that helps. The question was, are we confident that we know where all the victims are and that we will get everybody out? And the answer to that is that we believe we're going to be able to recover all of the victims, but no, we don't know where they all are at this point. So next 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes, sir.
So if I heard the 2 of you correctly, you have 12 victims that you have yet to recover, but you believe you have 11 sets of remains that you've seen based on the dives you've done so far. Did I not hear that correctly?
So the question was, doing our math, we have identified, let me get the number that I gave, 55? 55, I want to be clear on that we have positively identified. We did remove 11 sets of remains yesterday from the wreckage during our operation. So those two number, the 55 includes from that 11, okay? So we're still searching for the delta between it.
And you expect that when you lift the fuselage, that you'll be able to recover more remains in the fuselage? Or in the two?
So
I know you
that's
have two
part of
distinct-
this operation, right? We're gonna, as we recover the fuselage, we expect that we'll find more, but we may also need to do additional searches in other areas. So, hang on. Yes, sir.
There was a question, thank you, about meeting with the families, and we know the emotion that they're going through. But your guys and people from all over the region, your divers, Baltimore, wherever they're coming from. I was told there'd be divers from, as long as they could drive here, they'd be here. But talk a little bit about the emotional toll on your men and women who were down there, who were doing this recovery effort. I mean, the emotion that they are going through as well.
So I'm going to speak first a little bit, and then the captain's going to talk as well. There's a lot of work that goes into supporting our responders on an everyday basis, right? First responders across this nation, across the world, see a lot of things. They see people on their worst day. So we have built-in support systems in our fire department and a lot of things in our region. It's something called peer support, but there's various names for it. Peer support is the first layer of defense for first responders. It is peers that have some training to help people understand that the feelings they have are normal and how to get help if there's any feelings that aren't going away, if you're the signs and symptoms, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're not eating well, we don't want you to drink, right? We don't want you arguing with your family if all that is something new based on the incident. And we have programs in all of our organizations around this region to help people. And I think that's really important. The other thing you're seeing a lot of is the peer support dogs or the facility dogs. You see some here for the incident command team. They're under a lot of stress as well. So having those dogs here, it relieves some of the pressure, but it also gives the handler a chance to talk to the responder about all of those things we just talked about. Additionally, we know that members of the community are feeling that, and we want to make sure they know that the crisis hotline is out there at 988. So I think that's good. Captain?
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, along those same lines, with the Coast Guard, we have something called Critical Incident Stress Management, or what we call CISM. And then we have chaplains that we have on a 24-hour rotation. So as soon as our crews go out and come back into home base, we have CISM teams waiting to speak with them. Like Chief said, we understand this is not normal, and it's okay for them to not feel okay. And we want them to have someone to talk to as soon as they arrive back to the base. And with those 200 people that we have involved in this operation, part of that is crew relief. So we have multiple crews from all around the Coast Guard that have come here to help out, to make sure that when someone feels like they need to just take some time out to reset, we have the backbench strength to get in there and help them out. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been having a steady stream of folks coming through to help with critical incident stress management and chaplain services. In addition, we have what we call our senior enlisted advisors that kind of go around and just get the pulse of the crew and make sure everybody's doing okay. This is a large incident, and it puts a lot of stress on everybody. And working together as a team, we're trying to stay on top of the mission, but we got to make sure we take care of our own people as well, and that's what everybody's been doing as a team.
Thank you, Captain. Over here.
Thanks, Chief Donnelly. Jonathan Kersley from Channel 9 Australia. You've mentioned the impact on the families, the impact on the crews involved. I'd like to know from you personally, how are you coping through all of this? How do you deal with what you're seeing, hearing from the families? And Colonel, this tragedy obviously involves members of the military family too. How do you contend with and deal with that as a military unit yourselves?
So I'm going to let the Colonel go first.
So I think that in the military, we're grieving the same way that the communities and everyone else is grieving, right? There's obviously a tragic loss for each one of those individual families. For everyone that wears this uniform and serves, they go into that knowing that there's a level of risk in the type of work that they do. Every one of those crew members understood that just the very nature of the work that they do incurred some level of risk, right? So, but that alone is probably not enough to kind of overcome really the grief that this tragic incident brings. And similar to what Captain Burkett says, as a military, we rally as a family around each one of those Army families that are associated with this tragedy, and we do whatever we can to provide them whatever support the Army community has to offer to get them through this tragedy.
And Fire Chief, the impact on you personally?
So you're not going to let me off the hook on that question. I think this is, it's hard for everybody that's responding to it. For me right now, it's mission focused, and that helps you get through the process, and I'm confident that later this week, I plan to talk to our peer support people and see what they're saying, or what they will remind me of all the things that need to happen. I'll also say that what's been important to me is to watch everybody, all of our teams work together. That's helpful, right? And the second part is that I have a 2.5-year-old grandson at home, so he's a good reset when I get home. And as long as I get some sleep, we're good.
We'll take a couple more.
So 1, 2, and we'll start with those 2.
Colonel Perry, you brought this up. Can you say whether or not any of the divers who were at the Key Bridge incident are also directly involved with this? And then I have another question after that.
Yeah, so, the specific divers I can't say for sure by the individual divers, but I would tell you that the organization that's spearheading this effort for us, the Superintendent of Salvage Dive Operations for the Navy, they were the very organization that we went to. They provide a very unique capability. This is a very niche role, and they bring all the expertise and experience that we need to be able to do this correctly.
Thank you. And then the follow-up, can you just talk at all about your conversations maybe with the NTSB? Are there things and extra, how is their investigation sort of involved at all with the salvage operation in terms of, any complexities with just maintaining the integrity of the aircraft as much as possible so they can conduct their investigation? Yeah, sure. I'll talk about that. We have a process that's built in. I mean, we talked about a little bit earlier about how we're managing the wreckage as it comes out of the water. All that is also to support the investigative operation, right? So the very first touch point for the investigation, outside of what's already been done as far as the salvage piece goes, is once it hits the surface of the barge, right? So that's the very first touch point where we're going to see investigators go in there and really take an initial assessment of kind of what they see. That's all going to be done under a tarp. That'll be a very controlled process from the barge over to the transport system that'll take it to a secured hangar, and that hangar is actually controlled by NTSB right now, and that part is all under their initial safety investigation before it goes to another secured site. So I think we're nested.
And then there was a question over here.
Yeah, Colonel Ott, are you able to talk about the nature of the training mission that those pilots were conducting at the time of the collision, why that was necessary near the airport? And then I have a follow-up for you, sir.
Okay, so the question was the nature of the training mission that the unit and pilots were flying, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I will tell you this unit is based here in D.C. Their daily missions include providing support to not only Army senior leadership and Department of Defense, but also senior leaders throughout the U.S. government and other agencies. And so they fly these routes continuously. And these routes are not just military helicopter routes. They're helicopter routes for all of the agencies and organizations, of which there's probably almost 30 agencies, law enforcement, and other organizations that fly helicopters in the area. And so the FAA controls those routes, dictates the procedures, and as the specifics on the training mission that I think have already been kind of talked about is that these were 2 experienced, qualified pilots to fly in this local area. This is something they've done many times before. and they were simply out flying a mission that's a training mission that's required to reevaluate, just like every Army pilot does on an annual basis. You get reevaluated, re-signed off to fly in your local area. And you do that by flying the routes and the missions that you normally perform.
Given the accident, I understand the FAA has put some flight restrictions on helicopters around national. Is the Army looking at making any changes to its procedures when operating in the National Capital Region in this airspace around the airports?
As far as changes to procedures or anything, again, I would reiterate that it is the FAA that controls how helicopters transit and the routes that fly around here. And we will certainly be interested to see what, if anything, they decide to do. And then internally, the Army always looks to learn and inform ourselves on any potential changes that need to be made. But I think it's entirely probably premature, and that's what the NTSB does. You know, they're the best in the world at digging into this and finding out what went wrong. And so when we find those facts, then we will certainly look at them hard and see what needs to be done.
Yes, sir.
Chief, I understand details of the investigation will fall to the NTSB, but I would imagine, given the work that the divers are doing to recover those remaining victims, investigators have had a somewhat limited access to the wreckage, to the crash site. Can you speak at all to that and whether or not that is delaying some of that work, how all these parts are working together?
So the question is, given the location of the aircrafts and all the dive work in terms of removal, has that slowed the investigation process down? Am I summarizing that right? I would say that we're working closely with NTSB. They are a participant. They have a liaison in our command post, and that is, to the best of my knowledge, everybody's needs are being met, and that there are investigative pieces that have been taking place. Okay. We're done. Thank you. I appreciate all your questions and time.